elderly couple abandoned at the farm by their children. But when they discover the inheritance, Margaret Ellen Thompson held tightly to the trembling hand of her husband Robert William as the dust kicked up by their children's car still danced in the hot air of that March afternoon. The two remained still on the dirt road, their old suitcases at their feet, trying to process what had just happened. It was then that Robert William opened the letter that Michael, the eldest son, had handed him before leaving with his siblings. The handwritten words seemed to hit like a hammer in the 75-year-old man's chest. "Dad and Mom, we can no longer support you in the city. The family farm has been empty for years. You can stay there. When our situation improves, we'll come back for you." "Maggie, they really abandoned us," whispered Robert William, his voice breaking for the first time in decades. Margaret Ellen, at 72, felt her legs go weak. 50 years of marriage, 3 children raised with so much love and sacrifice, and now they were there alone, discarded like old objects that were no longer useful. "Robert William, my love, just look where we are," she said, pointing to the property stretching out before them. Willow Creek Farm had belonged to Robert William's father for over 80 years. The main house, which had once been the family's pride, was now overgrown with weeds. The windows were broken, some roof planks had fallen, and the wooden gate hung crooked on its rusty hinges. It was as if time had stopped there long ago, but they had no choice. Robert Williams' cell phone showed no signal in that remote area of rural Kentucky. The nearest road was 15 kilometers away, and they didn't even have money for a bus ticket. "Let's go in, Maggie. At least we have a roof," said Robert William, picking up the 2 heaviest suitcases. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The front door creaked like a lament as Robert William pushed it open. The smell of mold and abandonment filled their nostrils. The main room was covered in a thin layer of dust, and old furniture remained covered with sheets yellowed by time. Family photographs were scattered on the floor, some with broken glass. Margaret Ellen bent down slowly, her joints protesting, and picked up a wedding photo of them. The glass was cracked right down the middle, separating her young face from Robert Williams. "Remember that day, Robert William?" she asked, wiping the dust from the frame with the sleeve of her faded brown blouse. "How could I forget? You looked so beautiful in your mother's white dress," he replied, trying to hide the emotion in his voice. They walked through the house, each room telling a different story. In the room that once belonged to Michael, Margaret found some broken toys. In Jennifer's room, the middle child, there were still drawings stuck to the wall, already yellowed and peeling. And in Jason's room, the youngest, a collection of rusty toy cars rested on a dusty shelf. "They used to play here so much during vacations," murmured Margaret, running her fingers over a red car that Jason loved. "They'd run all over the house, climb trees, swim in the pond. They were so happy here." Robert Williams sighed heavily as he tested one of the kitchen chairs. The wood groaned under his weight but held. "And now they brought us back here to die, far from everything and everyone," he said bitterly. "Don't talk like that, Robert William. We're not going to die. We're going to survive," replied Margaret, with a determination that surprised even herself. That first night, they slept on the old mattress in the main bedroom, wrapped in blankets they found in a closet. The roof was leaking in several spots, and the sound of the rain that had started falling kept them awake for hours. "Maggie, how did we come to this?" Bob asked in the dark. "I don't know, my love. We gave them everything. We worked our whole lives, never denied them anything. When you sold the auto repair shop to pay for Michael's education, I didn't complain. When I had to sell my jewelry to help Jennifer when she got divorced, I did it wholeheartedly. And when Jason needed money to start his business, we even gave them our house in the city," Bob finished. "And now that we're old and need them, we've been thrown away." Margaret turned in bed and held Bob's face in her hands. "Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, Robert William Thompson. We are not going to give up. This land is ours. It's been in our family for generations. If they think they can just dump us here to die, they are very mistaken." The next morning, they woke to the sound of birds singing. The sunlight coming through the cracks in the broken windows gave the house a less gloomy appearance. Margaret went to the kitchen and discovered the water pump still worked, even after so many years of sitting idle. "Bob, the water is still clean," she shouted, filling an old pot she found in the cupboard. While Bob tried to fix one of the chairs, Margaret decided to explore the house further. She went to her father-in-law's office, a small room at the back of the house where he used to keep the farm's papers. The wooden desk was locked, but the key was still in the same place as always, inside an old cookie tin on the shelf. With trembling hands, Margaret opened the main drawer. Inside were several documents yellowed with time, deeds, certificates, old receipts. But it was a sealed envelope that caught her attention. Written on it was, "For my descendants," in the careful handwriting of old George Thompson, Bob's father. Margaret opened the envelope carefully, as if it might explode in her hands. Inside was a letter and some documents she couldn't quite understand. But one phrase in the letter made her heart race. "This property is worth far more than it appears, as it sits atop one of the largest mineral water springs in the region." "Bob, come here, quick!" she shouted, barely able to contain her anxiety. Bob appeared in the office doorway, still holding an old hammer. "What is it, Maggie? You're white as a sheet." "Read this," she said, handing him the letter with trembling hands. Bob put on the reading glasses he always carried in the pocket of his light blue shirt and began to read aloud. "My dear children and grandchildren, if you are reading this letter, it is because I have already departed this life. I want you to know that this property holds a secret I have kept my entire life. 40 years ago, when a geologist came through here doing research, he told me our land sits on one of the largest mineral water reserves in the state. I never wanted to exploit this commercially because I believed water should be free for all. But I leave this information for you in case you ever need it one day." Bob stopped reading and looked at Margaret with wide eyes. "Maggie, do you understand what this means?" "It means this property could be worth a fortune," she replied, hardly believing what she was saying. Bob continued reading the documents that came with the letter. There were technical reports, property maps, and even a purchase offer from a mineral water company from 20 years ago, offering an amount that would make anyone rich. "Why did Dad never tell us about this?" asked Bob, incredulous. "Because he knew the children he had," answered Margaret, with a deep sadness in her voice. "He knew that if you all found out, greed would take over everything." In that moment, they understood why old George had been so strict with money his whole life. It wasn't a lack of resources, it was a fear that wealth would corrupt the family. "And now, Bob, what do we do with this information?" "For now, we do nothing. We'll keep it a secret just like my father did. First, we need to better understand our situation." For the rest of the day, they explored the property more. Bob discovered that the old generator still worked and managed to bring electricity to some of the rooms in the house. Margaret found some canned goods in the pantry that were still within the expiration date and managed to prepare a simple meal. In the late afternoon, while they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, they heard the sound of a car approaching. "Do you think it's them?" asked Margaret, with a mix of hope and fear. "I don't know, but that car doesn't belong to any of our children," replied Bob, recognizing the different sound of the engine. A dusty white Ford Focus stopped in front of the gate. Out stepped a man of about 50, thin, with graying hair and simple farm worker's clothes. "Good afternoon," he shouted, waving. "Sorry to bother you. I'm Frank Miller. I live on the farm next door. I saw some movement here and came to take a look." Bob stood up and went to the gate. "Good afternoon, Mr. Frank. I'm Bob Thompson, son of the late George. This is my wife, Margaret." "Ah, Bob, I remember you when you were a boy. Your father was a very good man. He helped me many times when I was just starting out. But didn't you folks live in the city?" "We did, yes, but we had to come back here," replied Bob, not wanting to go into details. Frank noticed the sadness in Bob's tone and didn't press the matter. "Look, if you need anything, you can count on me. My wife makes some very good sweets. I can send some over for you." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Frank," said Margaret, approaching. "Do you know the area well?" "I know it like the back of my hand. I've lived here for 30 years. Why do you ask?" Margaret and Bob exchanged quick glances. "It's just that we're thinking about maybe doing something with the property. We don't really know what yet," said Bob cautiously. "Ah, this land is very good. It has abundant water, fertile soil. I just never understood why it was never put to good use. Your father always said he didn't want to mess with it." "Do you know of any company that might be interested in land around here?" asked Margaret, trying to disguise her anxiety. Frank scratched his chin, thoughtful. "You know, a few years ago, some men in suits came through here, doing some research. They said something about water, but your father didn't want to talk to them. Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity," Bob replied quickly. "But thank you very much for stopping by, Mr. Frank." After the neighbor left, Margaret and Bob went back inside the house. "Bob, I think we need to be very careful about who we talk to about this," she said. "You're right. If word gets out that there's mineral water here, all sorts of people might show up trying to take advantage." That night, they went over all the documents they had found. There were detailed maps of the property, technical reports on the water quality, and even economic feasibility studies for commercial exploitation. "Maggie, if this information is correct, we own a fortune," said Bob, hardly believing what he was saying. "And our children have no idea," added Margaret. "They abandoned us here thinking this land was worthless. What do you think they would do if they knew?" Margaret sighed deeply. "I don't even want to imagine, Bob. Greed has already turned them into people I don't even recognize anymore." In the following days, the couple dedicated themselves to cleaning and organizing the house. Bob, who always had a knack for fixing things, managed to repair several broken items. Margaret, with her experience as a homemaker, turned the rooms into livable spaces again. It was during this cleaning that they made another surprising discovery. In the main bedroom, behind an old wardrobe, Margaret found a hole in the wall that seemed to have been made on purpose. Inside was a rusty metal box. "Bob, come see this," she called, unable to move the box alone. Together, they managed to pull the box out of its hiding place. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom with dried-out adhesive tape. When they opened it, they found something that left them speechless: antique jewelry, gold coins, and a thick stack of old but still valid bills. "Good heavens," whispered Margaret. "How much money is this?" Bob carefully counted the bills. It was over $50,000 in cash, besides the jewelry that seemed to be worth a fortune. "Dad kept all this here for years," he said, emotional. "He was prepared for any emergency." "And we never knew," added Margaret. "How many times did we struggle in the city? And this fortune was here all along." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, the following week Bob and Margaret were already adapting to life on the farm. They had food, clean water, and even electricity in some rooms. The money they found had given them a sense of security they hadn't felt in a long time. It was on a Thursday morning that they heard the sound of a car approaching again. This time, it was a silver Toyota Camry they knew well, the car of Michael, their eldest son. "He came alone," observed Margaret, peeking through the window. "Do you think he's sorry?" asked Bob, but without much hope in his voice. Michael got out of the car wearing an expensive suit and dress shoes that clearly weren't suitable for a farm. At 45, he was a bank manager in the capital and always made a point of showing off his social status. "Dad, Mum, how are you?" he asked, approaching the porch. "We're alive, son, which is more than you expected," replied Bob coldly. Michael seemed uncomfortable with his father's direct response. "Dad, don't be like that. You know our financial situation is tough. I have 2 kids in private school. Amanda is unemployed. The bills are tight." "And that's why you decided to abandon us here?" interrupted Margaret, not hiding her hurt. "It wasn't abandonment, Mom. It was a temporary solution. You can stay here until things get better for us." Bob stood up from the chair where he was sitting. "Michael, are you saying that when you're doing well again, you'll come back to get us? Like we're dogs you leave at the kennel when you travel?" "That's not it, Dad. You're twisting everything." "Then explain properly what it is," said Margaret, crossing her arms. Michael took a deep breath and looked around the property. "Look, to be honest, I didn't know this property was in such poor condition. Maybe we can think about selling and splitting the money. That way you'd have some income to support yourselves." Bob and Margaret exchanged meaningful looks. It was exactly what they expected. Michael hadn't come out of longing or regret, but out of financial interest. "Sell the farm?" asked Bob, feigning surprise. "Yeah, Dad. Let's be practical. This land isn't good for anything anymore. It's been abandoned for years, the house is falling apart. It's better to sell for whatever price and split the money among everyone." "Among everyone?" questioned Margaret. "Including us?" "Of course, Mom. Everyone gets a share." "You could rent a small apartment in the city and live with dignity." "And who would buy a property in this condition?" asked Bob, wanting to see how far his son's knowledge went. "Oh, I've already done some research. There are some companies that buy land for eucalyptus plantations. They don't pay much, but it's better than nothing." Margaret felt a mix of anger and disappointment. Her son was proposing to sell the family land for a low price, not knowing they were sitting on a fortune. "Michael, this property has belonged to the family for over 80 years, she said. "Your grandfather worked his whole life to maintain it." "Mom, there's no use being sentimental. Times have changed. Nowadays, land is only worth something if it produces money. And this one has been unproductive for decades." Bob controlled himself to not talk about the discovery of the mineral waters. He wanted to see how far his son would go with his proposal. "And if we don't want to sell?" "Dad, be reasonable. You don't have the means to take care of a property this size. It's better for everyone." "Everyone or just for you?" asked Margaret directly. Michael seemed irritated by the question. "Mum, I came here to try to help you, and you're treating me like I'm the villain of the story. Son, you abandoned us on a rundown farm far from everything, without even knowing if we had the means to survive here. How do you expect us to treat you?" replied Bob. "You're exaggerating. I knew you'd figure it out, you always have." "That's right, Michael, we always figured it out," said Margaret with irony. "When you needed money to buy your house, we figured it out by selling our own house. When Jennifer got divorced and was left with debts, we figured it out by lending our emergency savings. When Jason wanted to start his business, we figured it out by selling the car. We always figured out a way to help you. And now that it's us who need help, you also figure it out, by abandoning us here." Michael was silent for a few moments. When he spoke again, his voice was more defensive. "Look, I didn't come here to fight with you. I came to make a proposal that can solve everyone's problems. If you don't want to accept it, that's your problem." "What kind of proposal?" asked Bob. "I have a friend who works at a real estate agency that specializes in rural properties. He can appraise the land and make a fair offer. If you accept, we can sort everything out without any hassle." Margaret and Bob realized Michael had already planned everything before even coming to talk to them. "Has this friend of yours been here?" asked Margaret suspiciously. "No, but I sent him some photos via text message for a preliminary look." "What photos?" asked Bob, his tone changing. "Oh, I took some when we came to drop you off here, of the house, the grounds, things like that." "So you were already planning to sell our property before even bringing us here?" said Margaret, outraged. "It's not like that, Mom. I was just thinking about the possibilities." "Michael, I want you to leave," said Bob, standing up. "Dad, don't be stubborn. It's a good opportunity for everyone." "I told you to leave, now." Michael realized he had gone too far. He tried to change his strategy. "All right, Dad. I'll come back another day when you're calmer to talk. But think about what I said." After their son left, Bob and Margaret sat on the porch in silence for a long time. "He hasn't changed a bit, Bob," she said finally. "On the contrary, he's gotten worse. Before he at least disguised his greed. I wonder what the other two are thinking." "We'll find out soon, I'm sure." And they found out sooner than they imagined. The next afternoon, 2 cars arrived almost at the same time. From the first one got out Jennifer, the middle daughter. From the second, Jason, the youngest. Jennifer, 42 years old, was a teacher at a private school in Cincinnati. She had been separated for 3 years and was always complaining about her financial difficulties. Jason, 38 years old, had opened a clothing store that never worked out and now worked as a salesman at a dealership. "Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom," said Jennifer, kissing them both without much affection. "Hey, everyone. How are you guys managing here?" asked Jason, looking around with a critical expression. "We're managing just fine," replied Margaret dryly. "Michael came by yesterday and said you don't want to sell the property," said Jennifer, getting straight to the point. That's true, confirmed Bob. But Dad, you can't be so stubborn, said Jason. This property isn't worth anything. It's just a money pit. A money pit for whom? Asked Margaret. For everyone, Mum. You can't afford to keep this place. The house is falling apart. The land is abandoned. It's better to sell now. And what do you get out of it? Asked Bob directly. The two siblings glanced at each other quickly. Nothing, Dad. We just want what's best for you, replied Jennifer. Lies, said Margaret, surprising her children with the harshness of her response. What do you mean, Mum? I said lies. You are lying. You want to sell the property to get a share of the money. Mum, what kind of story is that? Asked Jason, pretending to be indignant. The story is that Michael already brought a ready-made plan. He even showed pictures of the property to a friend from the real estate agency. Do you think we're fools? Jennifer sighed, realizing it was useless to keep pretending. All right, I'll be honest with you. The three of us are having financial difficulties. Michael is behind on his house payments. I owe money on my credit card. And Jason has bad credit. And that's why you abandoned us here, hoping we would die soon so you could sell the land? Asked Margaret with tears in her eyes. That's not it, Mom. We don't want you to die, said Jason. Then what do you want? We want you to be practical. This property is just a money pit. It's better to sell and split the money. That way, everyone is better off. Bob stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. Do you know what hurts me the most in all of this? He said, without turning to his children. It's not even your greed. It's the lies. You don't even have the courage to admit you want our money. Dad, it's not like that. Yes, it is, Jennifer. It's exactly like that. You made a plan to get rid of us and still get our inheritance while we're alive. You're not going to live forever, said Jason, and immediately regretted the words. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret began to cry silently, and Bob turned to his children with an expression they had never seen before. Get out, he said, in a low but terrifying voice. Dad, I said get out, now. Dad, Jason didn't mean that, tried Jennifer. Not only did he mean it, he thought it before he said it. Get off my property. Daddy, you're overreacting, said Jason. I said get out, shouted Bob, making his children step back. After Jennifer and Jason left, Margaret broke down crying. Bob held her tight, trying to comfort her, but he himself was devastated. How did we raise children like this, Bob? I don't know, Maggie. I don't know where we went wrong. Maybe we didn't. Maybe they chose to be like this. That night, while Margaret slept, Bob lay awake thinking about what his children had said. You're not going to live forever. The phrase echoed in his mind like a hammer. It was true. They weren't young. Bob was 75 and had some health problems. Margaret was 72 and was starting to feel joint pain. But did that give their children the right to treat them as if they already had one foot in the grave? The next day, Bob made a decision. Maggie, I'm going into town to take care of a few things. What things, Bob? I want to talk to a lawyer, and I also want to find out more about this mineral water story. Do you want me to come along? No, you stay here and take care of the house. If any of our children show up, don't tell them anything about what we found out. Bob hitched a ride with Frank, who was going into town to do some shopping. In town, he looked for the only lawyer he knew, Mr. Stanley Benson, who had handled the paperwork when they sold their house in the city. Mr. Bob, what a surprise to see you here, said the lawyer, a 60-year-old man with glasses and a prominent belly. Mr. Benson, I need your help with a delicate matter. Bob told the whole story to the lawyer. The children's abandonment, the discovery of the documents about the mineral water, and the children's attempts to force them to sell the property. Interesting, said Mr. Benson, analyzing the documents Bob had brought. These reports are from a reputable company. If the information is correct, your property could be worth millions. Millions? Yes, Mr. Bob. Quality mineral water is a very profitable business, and if you have a spring of that size, you could either sell the property for a very high price or develop it commercially. And my children? Can they force me to sell? No. As long as you are of sound mind, the property is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. But what if they say I'm senile? Well, then a legal process would be necessary. But from what I can see, you are perfectly lucid. Mr. Benson also advised Bob on how to protect the property from possible attempts at fraud by the children. I'll prepare some documents to ensure that no one can sell the property without your express authorization, and I'll also include some special clauses to protect you both. When Bob returned to the farm, he found Margaret talking with an elegant lady on the porch. "Bob, this is Mrs. Victoria Reynolds," said Margaret. "She came here to make us an offer." Victoria was a woman of about 50, very well dressed, driving an imported SUV. She had the air of someone used to handling important business. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Bob," she said, extending her hand. "I'm a real estate investment consultant. I heard that you might be interested in selling this property." "Who said that?" asked Bob suspiciously. "One of your sons contacted me, said you were considering selling." Bob and Margaret exchanged angry looks. "Which one of our sons?" asked Margaret. It was Mr. Jason, if I'm not mistaken. He gave me some basic information about the property." "And what kind of offer do you want to make?" asked Bob. "Well, from the description I received, it's a medium-sized rural property with an old house, no current commercial activity. For that kind of land, I can offer a fair market value." "How much?" $300,000 cash. Margaret almost choked. $300,000 was a lot of money for them, but if her father-in-law's documents were correct, the property was worth at least 10 times more. "Is it a good offer?" asked Bob, pretending naivety. "It's a fair value, Mr. Bob. Of course, you could try to sell it on your own, but the market is tough, and a property in this condition could sit for months or years without a buyer. What if we want to think about it?" "Of course, but my offer has a time limit. I can hold it for 1 week. After that, I'll have to move the money to other investments." After Victoria left, Bob told Margaret about his visit to the lawyer. "Bob, that woman is trying to cheat us. $300,000 is nothing compared to what this land is really worth. And I'm sure Jason has already arranged a commission with her. What are we going to do?" "We're going to wait. I want to see how far our children will take this." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following week, the 3 children showed up together at the farm. It was the first time they had united for anything in years. "Dad, Mom, we came to have a serious talk with you," said Michael, taking on the role of spokesperson. "We're listening," replied Bob, crossing his arms. "Mrs. Victoria made a very good offer for the property, $300,000 cash. It's more than this land is worth." "How do you know what her offer is?" asked Margaret. The 3 children exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. "We spoke with her," admitted Jennifer. "Oh, you spoke with her," said Bob with irony. "And what else did you discuss?" "Dad, don't be like that. We just want to help you make the right decision," said Jason. "The right decision for whom?" "For everyone, Dad. With $300,000, you could buy a small apartment in the city and still have money left over to live comfortably." "And how much is left over for you?" asked Margaret directly. "Mom, what kind of question is that?" said Jennifer, pretending to be indignant. "It's a simple question. How much are you going to get from this sale?" Michael sighed, realizing it was useless to keep pretending. "Look, to be honest, we could split whatever is left after you buy the apartment and set aside a reserve." And how much do you think will be left over?" "About 100,000, maybe 150,000. Divided 3 ways, that would be about 50,000 for each of us." Bob shook his head, incredulous. "So you abandoned us here, brought a buyer to make a low offer and still want to divide our money among yourselves?" "Dad, that's not how we see the situation," said Jason. "Then how do you see it?" "We see it as a solution that benefits everyone." Margaret stood up from the chair where she was sitting. "Children, I want to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer." "You can ask, Mom." "If you found out that this property is worth much more than $300,000, would you still be concerned about our well-being?" The question took the 3 by surprise. "What kind of question is that, Mom?" said Jennifer. "It's a hypothetical question. Answer it." "Of course we would, Mom. Our interest is your well-being," replied Michael, but without much conviction in his voice. "Lies," said Margaret calmly. "What?" "I said lies. You are lying to us and to yourselves." Bob moved closer to his wife. "Children, your mother and I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" asked Jason. "We'll do a test. We'll accept Mrs. Victoria's offer, but with one condition." "What condition?" "All the money from the sale will go to us. You won't get anything." The silence that followed was revealing. The three children looked at each other with expressions of panic. "Dad, but that's not fair," said Michael. "Why isn't it fair?" Because we helped get the offer." "Oh, so you want a commission for selling our property?" asked Margaret. "It's not a commission, Mom. It's that we also have a right to the inheritance." "Inheritance?" said Bob, raising his voice. "You want inheritance from living parents?" "That's not it, Dad." "It is, Jennifer, it is exactly that. You want our inheritance while we're still alive." Jason tried to change strategy. "Dad, Mom, let's be practical. You're not going to take the money to the grave. It's better to divide it now and have everyone be well off." Margaret started to cry again, and Bob exploded. "Enough! Enough of this talk!" he shouted, making the children jump. "You want to know? We're not selling anything. This property will remain ours until the day we die." "Dad, you're being irrational," said Michael. "Irrational? I'll show you what irrational is." Bob walked into the house and came back with the documents he had found about the mineral water. "Want to know why we won't sell to this Victoria Reynolds? Because this property is worth at least 10 times what she's offering." He threw the documents on the porch table. "Read this and see how foolish you are." The three children leaned over the documents, reading with increasing attention. As they understood the content, their expressions changed from confusion to shock, and then to poorly disguised greed. "Dad, this says there's mineral water on the property," said Jennifer, her voice trembling. "Not only is there mineral water, but it's one of the largest reserves in the region," confirmed Bob. "And why did you never tell us about this?" asked Michael. "Because your grandfather knew what kind of children he had," replied Margaret bitterly. "But Dad, if this is true, we're rich," said Jason, excited. "We?" shouted Bob. "We are nothing. This property is ours, not yours." "But Dad, when you pass away, it will be our inheritance anyway," said Jennifer. "Will it?" asked Margaret with a sarcastic smile. "Who said that?" "What do you mean, Mom?" "What do you mean what?" "You think that after abandoning us here, trying to trick us with a fraudulent sale, you'll still inherit anything from us?" The three children turned pale. "Mom, you can't disinherit us," said Michael. "We can't?" asked Bob. "Mr. Benson told me something very different this week." "You went to a lawyer?" asked Jason nervously. "Yes, we did. And we found out we can leave our inheritance to whoever we want." "That's not legal, Dad. Children have a right to their legitimate share," said Jennifer, who knew a bit about law because of her divorce. "Do they? Even after abandoning vulnerable adults?" asked Margaret. "Abandoning vulnerable adults?" repeated Michael. "That's exactly what you did to us. You brought us to an abandoned farm and left us here with no way to leave. If it weren't for our luck in finding money saved by your grandfather, we could have starved." "But you're fine," protested Jason. "We're fine on our own. Not thanks to you." The children realized the situation had spiraled completely out of control. The discovery about the mineral water had changed everything. "Dad, Mom, let's talk calmly," said Michael, trying to regain control of the situation. "Now you want to talk calmly?" asked Bob. "When you thought we were going to sell for 300,000, you were in a hurry. Now that you know it's worth millions, you want to talk calmly?" "Dad, it was all a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? You abandoned us here. You brought a buyer to trick us. You wanted to divide our money among yourselves. What part of that was a misunderstanding?" Jennifer began to cry. "Dad, Mom, we know we were wrong, but can you give us another chance?" "Another chance for what?" asked Margaret. "To show we're better children than you think." "And how do you plan to do that?" "I don't know, Mom, but we know we messed up badly." Bob and Margaret looked at each other. Part of them wanted to believe their children could change, but there was also the pain of recent betrayal. "Children, do you really want a chance to make things right?" asked Margaret. "We do, Mom," the three replied in unison. "Then leave here and don't come back until you have something real to offer besides words." What do you mean? Asked Jason. What do you mean what? You had 75 years of your father and 72 of mine to show love and care for us. In the last few months, you've only shown greed and abandonment. If you want to change that, you'll have to prove it with actions, not words. But Mom, how are we going to prove it if you don't give us the opportunity? You've already had the opportunity, 70 years of opportunities. Now, if you want to win back our trust, you'll have to figure out how to do it on your own. Michael tried once again. Dad, about the property. Wouldn't it be better if we all worked together to develop the mineral water? Oh, now you want to work? Asked Bob with irony. When you thought the land was worthless, you wanted to get rid of it. Now that you know it's worth millions, you want to work together. Dad, don't be like that. I'm not being any kind of way. I'm just reminding you of what you did 2 weeks ago. But people change, Dad, said Jennifer. Change? In 2 weeks? What an interesting coincidence. They changed right after finding out we're rich. The children realized they wouldn't be able to convince their parents at that moment. They decided to leave, but promised to return. We'll be back, Dad, said Michael as he walked toward the car. You can come back whenever you want, replied Bob, but you won't set foot on my property until you deserve to. After the children left, Margaret and Bob were silent for a long time. Bob, do you think we did the right thing? I don't know, Maggie, but I know we can't keep being treated as disposable old folks. Do you think they can change? Honestly, I don't know. But if they do change, it won't be because of us. It will be because they found out we're rich. And is that real change? No, Maggie, that's opportunism. That night, they talked about the future. They had a lot of money hidden, a property worth millions, and children who only cared about them for financial gain. Bob, I have an idea, said Margaret. What idea? What if we pretended we lost everything? How do you mean? We could spread the word that the mineral water story was false, that the documents were old and weren't worth anything anymore. That way, we'd find out which of our children really care about us. Bob thought about his wife's proposal. It's interesting, Maggie, but I think we already know the answer. Maybe, but it would be a definitive way to find out. And then, if we found out they only care about money, would we finally disinherit them for good? I don't know, Bob. I think we'll handle each situation as it comes. During the following weeks, Bob and Margaret didn't receive any visits from their children. It was as if they had disappeared after finding out their parents knew the true value of the property. They must be planning something, said Margaret. Absolutely. 3 greedy children finding out their parents are rich won't just sit still. And they were right. A month later, Mr. Benson called Bob with disturbing news. Mr. Bob, I need to speak with you urgently. What happened, Mr. Benson? Your children have filed a lawsuit against you and Mrs. Margaret. What kind of lawsuit? Guardianship for mental incapacity. Bob was in shock. What do you mean? They are claiming that you no longer have the capacity to manage your own affairs. They want a judge to declare you incompetent and appoint a guardian to manage the property. Can they do that? They can try. But to succeed, they would have to prove that you have truly lost your mental capacity. And from what we've discussed, that's impossible. What now? Now you'll have to go to court to prove you are of sound mind. When Bob told Margaret about the lawsuit, she was more outraged than sad. Now they've gone too far, Bob. It's true, Maggie. It's time we showed them they messed with the wrong people. On the day of the hearing, Bob and Margaret appeared in court accompanied by Mr. Benson. On the other side were the 3 children with a young, arrogant lawyer. The judge, Judge Richard Holloway, was a serious man of about 50. Let's get straight to the point, said the judge. The petitioners claim that the respondents have lost the capacity to manage their assets. What is the evidence? The children's attorney stood up. Your Honor, my clients are concerned about their parents' well-being. They are living on an abandoned farm, in precarious conditions, refusing advantageous sale offers, and demonstrating irrational behavior. What kind of irrational behavior? Asked the judge. They rejected a purchase offer of $300,000, claiming the property is worth much more based on old documents about mineral water that may no longer be valid. Mr. Benson stood up. Your Honor, I can present evidence that my clients are of perfectly sound mind and that the documents regarding the mineral water are valid and current. You may present it, Mr. Benson handed the judge a recent technical report on the property, which he had commissioned on his own. This report was done 2 weeks ago by a specialized company. It confirms that mineral water exists on the property and that the estimated value is at least $3 million. The judge read the document carefully while the 3 children paled. According to this report, the respondent's property is worth 10 times more than the offer they rejected, said the judge, looking at the children's attorney. That seems like a very rational decision to me. The children's attorney tried to recover. Your Honor, but this doesn't change the fact that they are living in precarious conditions on an abandoned farm. Mr. Benson, what are your clients' living conditions like? Your Honor, they are living comfortably on the property. They have water, electricity, food, and adequate financial resources. There is no evidence of neglect or incapacity. The judge called Bob and Margaret to testify. Mr. Robert, can you tell me why you are living on the farm? Yes, Your Honor. My children brought us here claiming they could no longer support us in the city. They left us here with just a letter explaining the situation. And how did that make you feel? Your Honor, I felt abandoned. I worked my whole life, raised 3 children with love, and when I got old, I was discarded like a useless object. And about the property, why don't you want to sell it? Because I found out it's worth much more than they were offering, and because my children were trying to trick me so they could keep part of the money. The judge called Margaret to testify. Mrs. Thompson, do you agree with your husband? I completely agree, Your Honor. Our children abandoned us here, hoping we would sell the property for a low price so they could split the money among themselves. And now they have filed this lawsuit. How do you feel about that? Your Honor, I feel betrayed. They found out we are wealthy and now want to have us declared incapacitated so they can control our money. The judge asked some technical questions to assess the couple's mental capacity, and it was clear that both were lucid and oriented. I will hear the petitioners now, said the judge. Michael was the first to testify. Your Honor, we are worried about our parents. They are elderly, living isolated on an abandoned farm. Mr. Michael, interrupted the judge, were you the one who brought your parents to this farm? Yes, Your Honor, but why did you bring them? Because our financial situation was difficult and we could no longer support them. I see. And when you discovered the property is worth millions, did your concern for their well-being increase? Michael fell silent, realizing the trap in the question. Your Honor, we have always been concerned about them. Is that so? So concerned that you abandoned them on an abandoned farm when you thought it was worthless, and filed for guardianship when you discovered it's worth millions. The judge quickly heard Jennifer and Jason, who couldn't present convincing arguments. At the end of the hearing, the decision was clear. This case is without merit, declared the judge. There is no evidence of mental incapacity of the respondents. On the contrary, they demonstrated rationality by rejecting a clearly disadvantageous sale offer. Furthermore, it became evident that this case was motivated by the financial interest of the petitioners and not by genuine concern for their parents' well-being. The judge paused and looked directly at the 3 children. I want to make it clear that elder abandonment is a crime under the Elder Protection Act. The petitioners should be grateful that their parents didn't file criminal charges against them. After the hearing, Bob and Margaret left the courthouse hand in hand, feeling victorious, but also deeply sad. Bob, I think there's no turning back now, said Margaret. It's true, Maggie. They showed us what kind of people they really are. What are we going to do now? We're going to live our life, Maggie. We're going to enjoy the time we have left without worrying about ungrateful children. When they arrived at the farm, they found their 3 children waiting for them on the porch. Dad, Mom, we need to talk, said Jennifer, her eyes red from crying. We have nothing to say to you, Bob replied dryly. Dad, please, we messed up badly, we know that. Messed up? Asked Margaret. You tried to have us declared insane to steal our money. That's not a mistake, it's a crime. Mom, it was the lawyer who suggested the lawsuit. We just wanted to protect you. That's a lie, said Bob. What you wanted was to control our money. Jason approached, crying, Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to earn back your trust." "And how do you plan to do that?" asked Margaret. "I don't know, Mom, but I'm willing to do anything." Bob looked at his youngest son. Jason had always been the baby, the most spoiled. Perhaps there was still hope for him. "Jason, do you really want a chance?" "I do, Dad. More than anything in the world." "Then I'm going to make you an offer, and only for you." Michael and Jennifer exchanged worried glances. "What offer, Dad?" asked Jason. "You come live here with us. No salary, no money, just to take care of us. If after a year you show you've truly changed, maybe I'll consider forgiving you." "What about us?" asked Jennifer. "Not you. You had your chances and wasted them all." "Dad, that's not fair," protested Michael. "Fair?" Bob exploded. "You talk about fairness? Where was fairness when you abandoned us here? Where was fairness when you tried to steal from us? Where was fairness when you filed a lawsuit to have us declared insane?" Michael and Jennifer realized there was nothing left to say. They left, leaving Jason alone with his parents. "Dad, I accept your offer," said Jason, wiping his tears. "I will prove I can be a better son." "Jason, it won't be easy," said Margaret. "You'll have to work hard, take care of the house, help with the chores, and show every day that your change is real." "I know, Mom, and I'm willing to do it." And so began Jason's phase of redemption. During the first months, he worked tirelessly on the farm. He helped renovate the house, tended to the garden Margaret had planted, and did the repairs Bob could no longer do alone. Gradually, Bob and Margaret began to notice that their son's change was genuine. He didn't talk about money, didn't ask about inheritance, and showed no financial interest in the property. "Bob, I think Jason has really changed," said Margaret one evening as they watched their son tending to the animals they had bought. "I think so too, Maggie. He's been here 6 months and hasn't shown a single sign of greed." "Should we give the other two a chance as well?" "I don't know. They had the same opportunity as Jason, but they chose to go to court." Meanwhile, Michael and Jennifer tried to find other ways to get close to their parents. They sent gifts that were returned. They called and no one answered. They showed up at the farm and were turned away by Jason, who had taken on the role of protecting their parents. One day, Jennifer showed up at the farm alone, on a rainy afternoon, completely soaked and crying uncontrollably. "Jason, I need to talk to Mom and Dad," she said, shivering from the cold. "Jennifer, you know they don't want to talk to you." "Please, Jason, it's important." Jason hesitated, but he ended up letting his sister in. Margaret, seeing her daughter in that state, couldn't hide her concern. "Jennifer, what happened?" "Mom, I lost everything. The apartment, the car, my job. I'm on the street." "What do you mean?" "After that lawsuit, the school where I worked fired me. They said they couldn't have an employee who sued her own parents. Without a paycheck, I couldn't pay the mortgage on the apartment. The bank took everything." Margaret felt her heart tighten, but Robert William remained firm. "And what do you want us to do?" he asked. "Dad, I don't want money. I just want a chance to show that I've changed. I can sleep in the car, but please let me work here at the farm with Jason." "Jennifer, you had your chance," said Robert William. "Dad, please, I know I was wrong, but I'm paying for my mistake. I lost everything because of my greed." Margaret looked at Robert William with pleading eyes. "Robert William, she is our daughter. Maggie, they are all our children, but not all of them have shown true remorse." "Dad, I will prove to you that I've changed," said Jennifer. "I don't want an inheritance, I don't want money. I just want to have my parents back." Robert William thought for a long moment. Finally, he sighed heavily. "All right, Jennifer, you can stay, but under the same conditions as Jason. No salary, no privileges, just hard work and dedication." "I accept, Dad. I accept anything." Jennifer moved to the farm and, just like Jason, began working hard to regain her parents' trust. During the following months, Margaret and Robert William watched the transformation of their 2 children. Michael, on the other hand, remained stubborn. He couldn't accept that his parents had forgiven his siblings and not him. He began spreading around town that their parents were being manipulated by their younger siblings. "They are brainwashing our parents," he said to anyone who would listen. "Jason and Jennifer are taking advantage of their age to get the entire inheritance." This gossip reached Robert William and Margaret's ears through their neighbor Frank. "Mr. Thompson, I don't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, but Michael is spreading some strange stories around," said the neighbor during a courtesy visit. "What kind of stories?" "He's saying that Jason and Jennifer are exploiting you, that they are forcing you to work, things like that." Robert William shook his head, saddened. "Frank, you're here right now. Do you see any sign that we are being exploited?" Frank looked around. The farm was unrecognizable. The house had been completely renovated. The property was clean and organized. There were well-cared-for animals, a productive vegetable garden, and Robert William and Margaret looked healthier and happier than they had in a long time. "No, Mr. Thompson. On the contrary, you both seem very well cared for." "That's because we are, Frank. Jason and Jennifer are taking care of us with great affection. And Michael? Michael chose a different path. He chose bitterness over remorse." 1 year after Jason moved to the farm, Robert William decided it was time for a serious talk with the 2 children who had stayed. "Jason, Jennifer, sit down. Your mother and I want to talk to you." The 2 sat on the porch, still afraid their parents would send them away. "Over this past year, you've shown you've truly changed," said Margaret. "You took care of us, the house, the property, without ever asking for anything in return." "Mom, we did that because we love you," said Jennifer. "And also because they know they messed up badly," added Bob. "We know, Dad," said Jason, "and we're willing to spend the rest of our lives making up for our mistakes." Bob and Margaret looked at each other and smiled. "It won't need to be the rest of your lives," said Bob. "You've already proven what you needed to prove." "What does that mean?" asked Jason. "It means you are forgiven," said Margaret, hugging both of her children. The 3 of them cried together, tears of relief and joy. "But Dad, what about Michael?" asked Jennifer. "Michael made his choices, daughter. We offered him the same opportunity, but he chose to remain bitter." "Maybe he'll still change," said Jason. "Maybe," Bob agreed. "But for now, the 3 of us will take care of each other." 2 years passed. The farm had become a prosperous property. Bob had decided to commercially develop the mineral water, but in a sustainable and responsible way. Jason managed the business, Jennifer handled the educational part of the project, and Margaret and Bob oversaw everything. They had created a social program at the farm, welcoming other seniors who had been abandoned by their families. The property had become an example of how to turn pain into purpose. It was on a Sunday morning that Michael showed up at the farm, after more than 2 years with no word. He looked different, thinner, in simple clothes, and with a humble expression his parents had never seen before. "Dad, Mom, can I talk to you?" he asked timidly. Bob and Margaret looked at each other. Jason and Jennifer were also present. "You can speak, Michael," said Bob. "I've come to ask for forgiveness, for real this time." "Michael, you've tried this before," said Margaret. "I know, Mom, but this time it's different. I lost everything, the house, my job, my family. My wife left me, she took the kids. I'm living in a rented room working as a street vendor." "And what has that changed?" asked Bob. "It's changed that now I understand what you felt when we abandoned you here. I understand what it's like to be left with nothing, with no one, with no hope." Michael paused, fighting back tears. "Dad, Mom, I don't want money. I don't want an inheritance. I don't want anything. I just want to have a family again. I just want to have you back in my life." "Michael, you had the same opportunities as your siblings," said Margaret. "Why didn't you accept it then?" "Because I was too arrogant, Mom. I thought I deserved everything without any effort. I thought you owed me something. Now I know it was I who owed everything to you." Jason and Jennifer looked at their parents, waiting to see what their reaction would be. "Michael, if I let you stay here, you'll have to accept that your siblings have already earned their forgiveness. You'll have to start from scratch," said Bob. "I accept, Dad. I accept any condition. And if one day we decide to leave our inheritance only to those who truly took care of us, will you accept that too?" "I will, Dad. I'm not here for the money. I'm here because I've discovered that a family is worth more than any fortune." Margaret stood up and hugged her eldest son. "Welcome back, my son." Bob also hugged Michael, and for the first time in years, the Thompson family was reunited again. 5 years later, Willow Creek Farm had become a national benchmark in senior care. The three children worked together on the project, each contributing their unique skills. Bob and Margaret, now 80 and 77 years old respectively, lived surrounded by affection and care. The property housed more than 50 elderly people who had been abandoned by their families, and everyone lived as one big family. On the day of the renewed golden anniversary of Bob and Margaret, the whole community gathered to celebrate. During the party, Bob asked to speak. "Friends, family, when my wife and I were abandoned at this farm 5 years ago, we thought our lives were over. But we discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures only appear after the greatest hardships." He looked at his three children, who were smiling proudly. "Our children made mistakes with us. They made serious mistakes. But two of them had the courage to acknowledge their errors and fight to correct them. And one of them took longer, but also found his way back. The money we discovered here at the farm gave us financial security. But the love we rediscovered for each other gave us something much more valuable. It gave us a real family again." Margaret stood up to speak as well. "I want to say to all the elderly who are here with us, you were also abandoned by your families just like we were. But here you found a new family. And I want to say to the families who sometimes visit us, it's never too late to rebuild relationships based on true love." The party continued late into the night, with music, dancing, and lots of joy. When everyone had gone to sleep, Bob and Margaret stayed alone on the porch, holding hands, watching the stars. "Bob, do you regret anything?" asked Margaret. "Some things, yes. I regret not having talked more often with my father about the values that really matter in life. Maybe if I had done that, our children wouldn't have taken so long to learn." "But they did learn, Bob, and that's what matters." "It's true, Maggie. And you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "That they didn't learn because they found out we're rich. They learned because they discovered that love is worth more than any wealth." "And the farm project? Do you think it will continue after we're no longer here?" "I'm sure it will, Maggie. Our children understood what the real treasure is that we're leaving for them." "What treasure?" "The ability to turn pain into love, abandonment into welcome, greed into generosity." Margaret smiled and squeezed her husband's hand. "So was all the suffering we went through worth it?" "It was, my dear. Every tear, every night of sadness, every moment of pain was worth it. Because in the end, we discovered that true love is indestructible. It can be tested, hurt, abandoned, but if it's true, it always finds a way back." They stayed there until dawn, planning new projects for the farm, dreaming about the future of the grandchildren who now visited them regularly, and thanking life for the second chance it had given their family. Willow Creek Farm became more than a property or a business. It became a symbol that it's never too late to start over, to forgive, to love again, and that sometimes life's greatest treasures are only discovered after we've weathered the greatest storms. End of story. So, dear listener, what did you think of this story? Can you imagine what it would be like if you were in that situation? Have you experienced something similar in your family or know someone who went through this? Tell us in the comments which part of the story moved you the most and whether you think Bob and Margaret made the right decisions. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Thank you for your company.